Back in 2016, I started a project on my website where I was going to look at each year of my life since I was born and the films of it. That project lasted about 2 months, and then my usual lethargy kicked in and I never got back to it. So here's the revived My Life in Film, starting with 1973. Yes, I was born in 1973. I know these youthful looks can be very deceiving, although not as deceiving as the youthful looks of my profile picture on Facebook at the moment, which has managed to garner at least one person so far who's creepily tried to add me as a friend. But anyway, 1973. A few weeks ago on Twitter, people were saying what was the best 5 films of the year that you were born. And when I got to it, I was like, I'm not narrowing this down. There's far too many. 1973 is such a good year. And it reminded me of me trying to do this as a monthly feature, as a write-up on the website. And I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to do it instead as the occasional little updates on this video channel. Even if we just take a look at the top films of 1973, the top grossing films box office wise, you've got films like The Sting, The Exorcist, American Graffiti, Magnum Force, Last Tango in Paris, Live and Let Die, Robin Hood, Paper Moon. Some good films, some average films in there, but there were so many other films in the whole mix that year. Ones that are close to my heart, ones that I wasn't that enamoured with but went back to and revisited and found a lot of love for. Strong year for films. Sorry about my throat at the moment. Got a bit of a cold coming on. Some of my particular favourite picks listed that year. I mean, you got Robin Hood, the Disney Robin Hood. Absolutely love that film. I've always loved Robin Hood stories, except for that Russell Crowe one. That was rubbish. Absolute garbage. But the Disney Robin Hood was one that as a kid I used to love rewatching. Every time something about it popped up on the TV, because we had to rely on TV back then. We didn't necessarily all have DVD players and VHSs to be able to play everything. We just had to wait for our Sunday afternoon entertainment on TV to match up to what we actually wanted to watch. James Bond's Live and Let Die, the very first outing for Roger Moore, which is the best outing for Roger Moore as far as I'm concerned. In fact, it's the only Roger Moore outing that I'm really that bothered about rewatching. The rest of them, kind of lost the plot. But that's a different blog for a different day. The Sting is one that I've only recently discovered, thanks to my big list that I've covered on an earlier thing of films that I should have got around to watching by now. And wow, what a film. You've got a couple of films that I'm not as enamoured as others with inclusion in the lists. Magnum Force, it is one of the weaker entries into the Dirty Harry series. The Exorcist was one that I did not like. I watched it a couple of decades ago at a late night screening at one of the local flea pit cinemas. And I couldn't see what the fuss was. I didn't get it. I didn't understand why people raved on about it so much. But when it came to making this article in 2016, one of the things that I gave myself to do between each article was pick a selection of films, and one of them had to be something that I watched and didn't like to reevaluate. And The Exorcist was one that I reevaluated, and I totally got it this time round. Maybe the hype had kind of lessened the experience, because it is a dated film. It does look old. You have to appreciate it in the context of the time that it came out. But it's chilling, it's twisted, it's well acted. It's a great film, and my reevaluation of it was just evidence that sometimes just don't take your first watch of something as gospel truth as to whether it's good or bad. Go back, check it out again later on. Sometimes you find yourself pleasantly surprised. Last Tango in Paris is, in my opinion, no means a good film. It gained notoriety simply because of its misuse of butter. I mean, that is not how you bake a cake. One curious entry on that top films list is Lucas's American Graffiti, which kind of gets forgotten about and kind of overlooked. But it's a great example of early Lucas before he fell to the dark side. It's a great little look at youth in America with a comedy approach. I've got some time for it. Don't rave about it. Got some time for it. The Academy Awards for 1973 saw The Sting take home Best Picture and Best Director, along with screenplay, original score, costume, art direction and editing, making it the standout winner for that year. Other nominees that year included The Exorcist, which we've already spoken about, put the horror genre back on the map and moving it away from the claret and corsets era of overdone horror. The year of 1973 also saw quite a few films released that became staples of my childhood growing up. We had another Planet of the Apes film. We had Battle for the Planet of the Apes. It was the closing chapter of the Planet of the Apes saga at the time. And as a kid, I absolutely loved it. I've not revisited this one as an adult because I always get as far as the third film. I'll watch Planet of the Apes and go, oh yeah, a lot of love for that. I'll watch Beneath Planet of the Apes and go, I like the play that they're doing with like the nuclear threat, etc., and people worshipping the bomb. And then I'll watch Escape from the Planet of the Apes, which goes backwards in time, and then they live in modern day. And by the end of that film, I'm so bored, I just can't be bothered going on to Conquest for the Planet of the Apes and Battle for the Planet of the Apes. One of these days, I might get round to watch them, but the problem now that we've got is we've now got another excellent Planet of the Apes trilogy to compare it against, and the old series sadly doesn't live up to what the new series does. Charlotte's Web, the animated movie, came out in 1973, and that was another one that got regularly viewed through my early years. An animated wonder that usually belonged to Disney, but here was delivered by Hanna-Barbera, of all things, to excellent emotional effect. Sci-fi, I mean, I've gone on about my sci-fi love in multiple formats over the years, and that year, sci-fi and horror got some really good coverage. We've already mentioned The Exorcist. We've got Romero's The Crazies, steps away from all his zombie stuff to like a virus-infected nation of nutjobs. Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing battled the creeping flesh. Vincent Price was chilling in Theatre of Blood. And Nick Rogue gave us Don't Look Now, which is one of the most chilling horror films with fantastic performances by Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie. Serpico also came out in 1973, and this is another film that I've recently discovered, having it as part of my list of Oscar-nominated films that I never got around to watching. And it's based on Peter Masser's biography about Frank Serpico, whose undercover work to expose the corruption in the police force put his life at risk. Al Pacino is absolutely amazing in this film, and it deservedly won him a Golden Globe for his troubles. Other films of note from that year, you had Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, a film which was savaged by the studio at the time, but managed to get a re-edited version released later. Release the original cut, hashtag. High Plains Drifter, one of the defining westerns of the era. It was a supernatural western, and it upset John Wayne, which that's a good thing in my books. John Wayne sent Eastwood a letter saying how he thought it was a disgrace to the genre. Enter the Dragon, which we covered on our recent podcast when we looked back at it, me and Lee. It's perhaps Bruce Lee's most well-known film, even if it's not necessarily his best. Lee died a few days before the film's release and didn't get to live to see how the film really influenced the West, and the kung fu craze of the 70s really took hold. Over in Japan, martial arts were the least of the worries for the nation as Godzilla started stomping on petrol stations again. In Versus Megalon this time, which was the 13th film in the series that just keeps churning them out. Even today, they're still churning them out. Finally, 3 films that really stand out for me this year. These are 3 films that I regularly go back to. And we've got the zany Woody Allen comedy Sleeper. Early Woody Allen with his slapstick, zany, sometimes surreal comedy worked a treat for me. It was my sense of humour, and growing up, I loved that kind of stuff and embraced it. We've also got the light farce of the Three Musketeers with Michael York in the lead role as D'Artagnan. Absolutely adore these films. Richard Lester's direction, Oliver Reed is in the Richard Chamberlain. The cast are great. They're all having fun. It's campy farce, and it's utter nonsense, and it's thoroughly enjoyable. And then you've got Mean Streets, which was the film that tipped me off to Scorsese back in my early to mid-teens. I absolutely loved it, took to it, and rewatched it so much, and it's still top tier Scorsese as far as I'm concerned. It's raw, it's a bit rough around the edges these days, but it's top tier. So, I mean, in general, 1973, not too bad a year. Pretty good year to be born in, to have such a wide range of films. And I've not even scratched the surface on quite a lot of things on there. There's a load more films that I could have really delved into, but I'm trying to keep these videos short, so I'm just highlighting the year. So, let me know below, or over on our Twitter feed, at FilmFileUK, films of 1973. What are your top picks? And that rounds up this roundup of 1973 in films. Thank you for watching.